Namatu Ratanatayasa. May I pay homage to Triple Jim, the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha. My respect goes to my parents and my teachers. Hello, good evening, everyone. So today is Monday, the 18th of January, 2021. So this is Ajahn Sujan from Varapunya Meditation Center, Aberdeen, Scotland. Once again, I'm here with you tonight. And thank you everyone for joining me, and good evening everyone. Hello Yvonne, hello Tune and Sandra, Manish, Margaret, and everyone. So thank you Yvonne for bread and all the juice and the fruits. Thank you very much for offering. And this morning Winnie and Varuni also dropped off for the lunch. So thank you very much. Despite of this difficult time, members are supporting the center. So thank you. Right, so let's go back to the topic of the day. And here I am studying and reading out this Satipatthana Samyutta from the scripture, the Buddhist canon. Yeah. And this is the first sutta, the discourse on Ambapali that I mentioned yesterday. And the story begins from the Buddha talking to the venerable monks and saying that, explaining that the satipatthana, or the establishment of a mindfulness, is important. And here in particular, this sutta, Buddha said that this is the one-way path for the purification of our beings, for the overcoming of a sorrow and lamentation, for the passing away of a pain and displeasure, for the achievement of the method, for the realization of nibbana, and this is for establishment of the mindfulness. And here further on saying that what are those for mindfulness, for establishment of a mindfulness. And Buddha further on going and saying that a bhikkhu dwells contemplating the body in the body, and the second is feeling in the feeling, and the third contemplating mind in the mind, and the last one is contemplating phenomena in phenomena. And after contemplating on the talking about these four foundations or establishment of mindfulness, there are a few words called ardent, which is a Pali word called atapi, and clearly comprehending, it's called sampajanya, and then mindful, and which is the sati. And before going into that, I want to explore a little bit on so-called this is the way, one-way path for the purification of beings. So here, when we talk about beings, it is regarding that someone who has walked on that path and attained the purification, or purified, or liberation. And here, whoever walks on that path, regardless of the ethnicity or nationality or creeds, if a person is diligently practicing and following that path, then the ultimate goal would be the attainment of a nibbana, the liberation. So that's why this is known as the path. It's like someone who has studied on the medical science to be a doctor, then end of the day he will be graduated to be the doctor, and this is how it will be going through. But in a worldly life, sometimes, despite of having our goals, and despite of we are walking on the path to the graduation on a particular subject or the area, once we have completed our graduation or our studies, we may not be working as we have studied, and we may change our minds. So that's why those paths may not be called deep path, and simply a path, not deep path. And there's always branches that you can go and pick. So that's why someone who is on medical studies, over the period of a time, someone becomes dentist, someone becomes opticians, others become different professions. They will pick it up and took it as their profession and live according to that. So there is always uncertain. Whereas the practice of this mindfulness meditation, or along with these four foundations of a mindfulness meditation, according to the Buddha's teachings, that once we have started walking on this path, end of the day, we will be attaining the liberation, that attaining the ultimate happiness, which is unconditioned state, the happiness that is beyond the essential pleasures, which is for sure. And you may have doubts, and you may have questions about it, that will it be possible to attain this liberation, attaining this ultimate happiness within this lifetime? Well, there is a possibilities that someone may have a great so-called perfections that they have perfected, or having a good merits that they have accumulated from the past, and they have this causes and conditions. Then there is a possibility that a person can liberate even in this life. But if we are not enlightening ourselves in this life, then doesn't mean that we will not be accumulating those knowledge and intellects for the forthcoming in the future, and which we can definitely see that each one of us are very different, and the qualities are very different, and the professions are different. Some, like, we can take an example of someone who has been very talented in one subject, or from the birth, or it's like the God-given skills. Immediately they can skilled it, like the footballers, or gymnastics, or pianists, or musicians. Sometimes, within a short period of a time of playing those instruments, or those exercising, immediately they can be very skilled and professionals, without any problems. Whereas there are plenty of people, those who have to spend pretty much a lot of time exercising and practicing, and yet again they may not be the example, or they not be the famous one. And this is again simply because the karma, or the previously accumulated merits is different. So that's why, in order to attain the success in our life, we do have to have the accumulation of a good deal of merits, and that throughout the time. And this merits again can be in this life, and as well as from the distance our lives. And that is the reason why I always see Buddhism is a skill to transform ourselves from unknown to known, or unskillful to be skillful. There is always opportunities, and we are always capable of changing our perceptions and changing ourselves from low to the higher. And this is why that once someone is practicing in accordance with the satipatthana practice, then sooner or later, over the period of a time, one will be attaining this purification of oneself. And when we look at this description, we see that all the all the people, those who are liberated, and those who are attaining the ultimate happiness, they all have followed this path called a satipatthana, or the establishment of a mindfulness. So that is the reason why this path is known as a deep path that leads nowhere but to the liberation. And here, when we see that, we understand that you don't need to be worried about the practice, that how unaware it is leading. And all the matter is how are you practicing. So that's why again here, when we say that all the beings here basically means every beings, not just a human beings, all the beings. If they have opportunity to practice, then there is a chance to purify themselves. And here again, in order to get the progress in the practice, not only the simple way of thinking that the practice of establishment of 4 foundations of mindfulness will lead us, but in a conventional level, we have to prepare ourselves too. We have to be diligently practicing too. And in order to get the good results of this practice, what we see that one has to follow the moral or ethical practices diligently, at least of the 5 precepts. Now, a couple of days ago, someone asked me that how one can be a Buddhist. And my answer was that no one can make you to be a Buddhist. You choose to be knower or not knower. So you choose to be a Buddhist. And there is a formal observation to be a Buddhist, and that is taking a refuge to the Buddha, Dhamma, and a Sangha. Buddha here means the one who knows and one who has got the qualities, three different qualities: the purity, compassion, and wisdom. And the second is the taking a refuge on the Dhamma, that this Dhamma is universal, and whoever practice in accordance with it, then it will help one to be liberated. If not yet liberated, then they will not be reborn into the below than a human world. So it's basically preventing from falling down into the awful states. And the third is taking a refuge on the community. And a community here is basically the community that is practicing in accordance with the Buddha's teachings diligently and trying to apply Buddha's teachings. So that is the first fundamental principles to define one to be a Buddhist. So that is the one principle to define one as a Buddhist. And this is again not only now someone is asking about it, but it was asked even the time of the Buddha. So one of the gentlemen, if I remember correctly, his name was Mahanama, and went and spoke with the Buddha and how one would define to be a Buddhist. And here again we have to remember that the word Buddhist is not the Buddhist term. It was given very late, probably about less than 200 years, and given the Buddha's teachings as a Buddhist or a Buddhism. Before than that, It was known as the teachings of the Buddha, or even the Buddha teacher, like that. But during the time of the Buddha, it was known as a Buddha Sasana, and even in Buddhist countries, it is known as a Buddha Sasana or a Buddha Dhamma, not as a Buddhism or Buddhists. But anyway, so then after Mahanama asked the Buddha that how one would define a Buddhist, then Buddha said that whoever wants to be a Buddhist, and here again a female and a male, and here it's called upasaka and upasikas. So once one become the followers of Buddhism, known as a Buddhist in English term, they should have taken the refuge on 3 triple gems called the Buddha Dhamma Sangha, and then to be a real Buddhist, virtuous Buddhist, and a good Buddhist who is walking on the path for the purification of himself and then for helping others to be purified. That upasaka or the Buddhists, lay Buddhists, should practice at least of these 5 precepts. So one has to practice 5 precepts in order to be a good Buddhist. Otherwise, you're simply Buddhist in the name of that you have taken a refuge, or in the name of that you were born in a Buddhist family or Buddhist country. But that doesn't make one to be a real Buddhist who is walking the path to purify oneself. So the second principle that Buddha laid down was the 5 precepts. And these 5 precepts are not taking the lives of any beings. And then the second is not taking what is not given. The third is no sexual misconduct. And fourth is not speaking any untruth. And the fifth one is not taking any intoxicants that intoxicates the mind to be clouded. And in regarding these 5 precepts, I have given the series of talks which is available on our YouTube, so you can go and listen detailedly all these 5 precepts. The purpose here I'm speaking this as here is simply that a person who are looking or who are thinking to purify themselves, first of all, is to take a refuge on something that they believe in, and the second is the practice of the 5 precepts. And if you are following Buddhist practices, then make sure that you have taken the refuge on a Buddha Dhamma Sangha with your great faith and confidence. And not only that, you have to practice, in order to be a real good Buddhist, you have to practice at least of 5 precepts. And that is the way to purify oneself or purify beings. And here again, what happens for those who are not believing in Buddhists or Buddhism, and would they be able to purify? Definitely, there is no boundaries for someone who doesn't believe in Buddha's teachings. It's not like any other religion that you have to be a Buddhist in order to be liberated, or in order to be saved by so-called divine God, or in order to be saved by the Messiah, or like that. But here in Buddha's teachings, we can see clearly that you don't need to be converted into any organized religion to be liberated. All what you need is to have this moral practices, and that leads to the purification. So whether you purified or not, it's not based on someone's or divine's wish. It is entirely up to your action that brings the purity in yourself. Even when we look at this discussion about Mahanama and the Buddha, when Mahanama asked the Buddha that how one can be a Buddhist and how one can be a good Buddhist, here Buddha simply said that one has to take a refuge on a Buddha Dhamma Sangha with a full faith and a confidence. And the second factor was the practice of 5 precepts in order to be a good Buddhist. So from here we can see that to purify ourselves is basically based on our own action, and which again a couple of days ago I mentioned that the happiness and unhappiness is based on our own reaction to the things. So similarly here, our purity and impurities depends on our own action too. And here, purity and impurities, no one knows apart from you yourself. Sometimes, doesn't matter how many years you've been living together. And sometimes there will be some form of impurities hidden inside you or inside your partners or companions for many, many years. And then suddenly you know yourself that you are not pure. And in that case, you need to be very careful on what you're going to do and how you're going to do. And this is why it's called purities and impurities. No one knows apart from you yourself. So, and this is again, it reminds me, a couple of months ago, someone asked me that how the Buddha, the Siddhartha, before he left the palace, how he didn't see any person who became old, who became sick, and who died for over 20 years until 29. How could it possible? People living with him or living close to him, they were also getting old. Some probably get sick, and probably some died. How on earth that the Suddhodana was able to hide all those facts from him? How innocent the Siddhartha was, which is impossible to experience such. And in this case, I remember my teacher, Venerable Sudarshan in Nepal, when I was a novice at that time, he told us that it is not that he didn't see, but he hadn't realized it, or hadn't seen from the inner eyes. It's like we've been living together for so long and we think that we know each other, and yet suddenly something happens, and then you realize, finally now I know the reality of who you are. Like friends, they have been friends for many, many years, and then they think that they know each other and they are pure in hearts and trustworthy in both together each other. And suddenly someone did something which is against one's wish, or didn't do what they wanted them to do, and immediately, you are selfish, and now I know your true element, true nature, and then suddenly everything changes. So that's how it happens. So that's why the purities and impurities is purely based on our own action, and we know alone, no one knows. And according to these teachings, we also come to understand that as long as we are not liberated, as long as we still have this greed, hatred, and delusion embedded in our minds and our heart, it is unlikely that we are fully pure or completely pure. And this is the reason why practice of 4 foundations of mindfulness helps us to uproot those clutters, impurities that's subconsciously saved in our hearts and minds. We do not know how many lives that we have lived in the past, and we do not know how many lives that we are going to live in the future. And yet here the matter is that we didn't know how many lives we lived, and over the period of a time we do not know that how many clutters and rubbish that we have subconsciously saved without knowing it, and just waiting to blast like a volcano, just to erupt at the moment when condition just comes together. So that's why this the practice of a four foundations, or for the establishment of a mindfulness, is so good that as we meditate, gradually as our mind settles down and as our mind calms down, then all those impurities will simply pops out one after another, one after another. And in the practice, all what we are doing is to watch, be mindful, and not having anything to do with it. Simply watch, see, let go. Watch, see, let go. And with that, gradually, we are basically cleaning or purifying our minds and heart from the deeper, from the subconsciousness. It's like a computer. Once you have used it for a couple of years, and you have saved so many informations over the period of a time, and later on you even forgotten that what document you have saved in which folder. So you have to go back and search for it again and again, and until it comes. And then we realize, like that. It's like 2 days ago, 2 or 3 days ago, I've been trying to find out my master's thesis in Aberdeen University that I saved in my computer, and I couldn't find it for so long, and I was so disappointed. And then somehow one day, about 3 or 4 days ago, when I was opening up my old folders and trying to find about the chanting, and suddenly I saw that folder, and I was like over the moon that finally I got it, like that. So practice of a meditation is like impurities that is saved in our hearts and minds, that is causing us to deep down regrets and unhappiness and troubled and feeling of insecurities. These will come out one after another, and gradually we will be able to say, that's fine, okay, finish. So every time when we say finished or just let it be, that means it's done, work is done. And that's how we will be purifying ourselves. And this is the worldly way of purifying ourselves. And then over the period of a time of a practice, and gradually we will be taking out and purifying all the impurities from our heart, so-called kilesas, and finally attain the liberation. Okay, so I end here for tonight's reflection on the first factor, the purification of beings, and we'll come back for others in following days. So thank you very much for listening, and may you all be well and happy. In a few moments time we're going to have evening chanting and guided meditation. You're most welcome to join with us. Until then, good night and see you shortly. Thank you. Satu.